Gamification is currently one of the hottest buzzwords in affiliate marketing, but what does it actually mean? In today's webinar, Raf Koistermans, co-founder and CEO of Farmville, will provide a practical guide to using gaming mechanics for affiliate marketing in the iGaming space. He'll provide innovative ideas for motivating customers and players to engage and examples of how to reward social media advocates. Raf is going to reveal some of the hottest information to put your best gamification foot forward. We'll be covering what gamification really means for the iGaming affiliate audience, how to use gaming mechanics for marketing, innovative ideas for motivating customers to engage, examples of how to reward social media advocates, and more. If you have any questions about any of the content presented today, as always, we will be providing an extended Q&A session for the last 20 minutes of the webinar. You are welcome to submit your questions throughout the presentation using the question panel in the GoToWebinar panel. But before we get started, I'd like to thank today's webinar sponsor, the Barcelona Affiliate Conference, better known as BAC. BAC is back in the sunny coastal city of Barcelona, giving over 2,000 affiliates and affiliate programs the perfect environment to make new contacts and do business. With over 100 affiliate programs in attendance and some of the best known names in SEO and digital marketing, every affiliate is sure to leave with great deals, take-home strategies, and a fantastic industry network. This year, BAC will incorporate IGB España. This is a niche event dedicated to one of the most lucrative markets available in the online gambling industry, the Spanish-speaking sector. Meet local affiliate programs, affiliates, and learn about the latest developments and opportunities in this Hispanic sector. So put the dates in your diary and attend on October 11th through the 14th, 2012 for one of the most comprehensive and well-respected affiliate events of the year. Now I'd like to welcome and introduce our guest speaker, Raf Koistermans. Raf is co-founder and CEO of Farmville, a VC-backed social casino games startup in London behind the hit game Mirrorball Slots on Facebook. A social games veteran with a background in gambling, Raf worked most recently as a strategic consultant for social and mobile game studios. Prior to that, Raf served as global marketing director for leading social game studio EA Playfish. Before Playfish, he headed up the European arm of EA's successful casual games platform, Pogo.com. He also worked for advertising agencies like BBDO, Graham Publicis, and was leading the marketing teams for online gambling operator Unibet in Western Europe from 2005 to 2008. Raf, welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you.
Thank you very much, Michaela, and hello everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you guys are.
Great, well, I'll let you get started.
Excellent, so thank you very much. In the next half hour, I'm going to talk to you about gamification and social games. The two are not completely the same, but there are definitely a lot of things that are similar. The first slide here basically shows you a timeline I think most of you guys are probably familiar with. It basically shows you from the very early days, from Pong in 1972 all the way to today's world of Facebook and mobile games, what actually happened. And the key takeaway here is that the people, today's consumers, today's decision makers, today's managers, were basically the gamers from back in the days. That generation basically is from 70s, 80s, and definitely in the 90s. That was basically when video games became mainstream. And the people who were then teenagers playing on their first generation PlayStation are today's 30 years and 35 and 40 years old. That basically means that for those guys, games and game mechanics is the new normal. They understand levels, they understand what it means to have a leaderboard. For those guys, all those mechanics are very much normal, and they almost expect those things to happen in other things. Let me see if I can, all right. So, the definition of gamification, there's not, I think, scientific agreement on what it actually means, what it actually does, but basically what it is the use of game mechanics outside the world of video games. So using game mechanics in non-game applications and business. So game mechanics like level structures, reward systems, points, badges, appointment mechanics, virtual currency. There's two main schools of thought around gamification. There's one school of thought that basically says games, video games, they only work because there's a combination of different elements. There's a really strong narrative, there's a story, there's characters, there's level design, there's a certain art style, there's sound, there's gameplay, and there's game mechanics. And it is because all these things are together in one game, they all come together and they all strengthen each other, that an actual game works, that an actual game is a very rich and immersive and really fun experience. So you cannot take just things away and still have a working experience. So that's, for example, what people like Professor Richard Bartle have been telling the world. And so that's one way of looking at it. There's another school of thought, which I would basically say is more in line with how I think around gamification, is that while that is definitely true, there are definitely certain game mechanics that can work as a standalone solution outside the game environment. We're basically going to look at some of those examples, but just one example would be to use levels as a way to structure complex content or complex processes. So levels as such, it doesn't mean that you're going to make a game out of something when you add levels, but it basically makes things a little bit easier to understand and to digest. So moving on to the next slide. It is not really about making things fun. Gamification is not about how can we make this thing which is currently really boring and make that into a game or make it really fun, or that's really not what it's about. It is not about making things a game. It is really about how can we improve businesses, how can we improve experiences by using certain game elements and certain game mechanics. And sometimes these things can be fun, but it's not really a given. Let's talk a little bit about the different ingredients, if you want, for successful gamification. I have to basically give a shout out here to the guys from PlayGen, which is a gamification specialist studio based here in London, UK. We've been really thinking and working a lot around these things, and they basically also, I would say, shaped the way how I think around gamification. There are basically 4 things you need to think about when you're working around gamification. And this is probably not rocket science, but it is really important that you take those things into consideration. We're going to look at different examples for all of those 4. The first thing is to understand what motivates my user, what motivates my customer. Second things are, what are the mechanics or the rules we can use? Is there any social interaction needed? And also, what are the victory conditions? How do you actually win in this thing? How do you level up? How do you achieve the next stage? Looking first at motivation, there's quite a few different things. Power, personal development, being recognized by your peers, status, very, very powerful. Also curiosity, learning things, creating new things. There's probably more mundane things as well. Winning, can I win stuff with it? Can I win cash, prizes? Ownership of something. Achievement, competition. When I worked at Pogo.com, and also today to a lesser extent at Mirrorball Slots, our audience were older female, 50 to 60-year-old women who were playing those games. And we really tried to understand what motivates these people. Why are these people, these grannies, if you want, why were these playing our casual games? And we really found out that for a lot of those people, it was about achievement, about being great in an environment where they basically could be the best or one of the best. A lot of those people were maybe not having fantastic careers, they were not top managers, they were not in the real world achieving greatness, at least not the way how most people define that from a career professional perspective, but they were achieving a lot in the world of Pogo or in the world of Mirrorball Slots or in the world of Pet Society, if you want. An interesting example of understanding motivation is Triplt. Triplt is a fairly boring business, I think. It's basically started as a business to help professionals structure their business travel. So if you're traveling a lot around the world as a manager or as a professional, this tool was developed first to help you arrange meetings. So if you go to Paris next week, you can schedule meetings with your local suppliers or partners and so on. And suddenly they found out, they actually at some point decided to link this with a LinkedIn professional network, social network. So the whole dynamics of this application changed. It became from a very functional tool, it became almost like a bragging tool. And people started using this because it was visible through LinkedIn to their professional network to almost use this and use the number of miles they traveled and the number of trips they took to brag. It became a bragging currency for their professional community using LinkedIn. So currently, the guys from Triplt try to understand how that thing worked, and that's when they started adding features like actually leaderboards, like who traveled most, who had most trips. This chap here on the slide is third place with the number of countries visited in a certain period of time. So this is basically, they try to understand what actually is the motivation. It moved away from being purely functional to a bragging currency. How global are you? How important are you? How many business trips can you take? And it basically really changes the dynamics of the application. Another example is of understanding underlying motivation is credit cards. Credit cards, there's different things. There's the black cards and the platinum cards and the gold cards and the green cards and so on. And they are basically levels. If you think from a gaming perspective, all these different things, they are actually level design. What makes them actually quite interesting is that they're quite unclear. Nobody really knows exactly. There's a lot of mythology around some of these cards. Do they exist? Apparently, you have unlimited access. You can go and buy a private jet with some of these things. That adds to the whole status element of those cards, of those levels. If somebody pulls out one of those Platinum American Express cards, you know that they actually mean something. There's a status added to that. And credit card companies are very, very aware of that, and they add to the whole mythology surrounding these cards. Talking about different game mechanics, and this is not a complete list, right? But a couple of, I think the most used game mechanics within the world of gamification and also social gaming, as we will see later. Resource management. You have a limited number of resources. You need to manage them, and sometimes there's also like a zero-sum game. If you collect more bricks in a game, that basically means you have less energy to do things, or vice versa. Auction is a very old and very powerful game mechanic. Obviously, in the world of e-gaming and gambling, luck, adding random elements is important. Time, things against the clock, you have 30 seconds to do something. Rewards. Most gamification campaigns use or maybe overuse things like badges and points and achievements, but it's definitely one of the core game mechanics. Risk, penalty versus reward, levels we talked about. Collecting is a very, very powerful game mechanic. Leaderboards ties back into status points. Appointment mechanics we'll talk a little bit later about. So these are a couple of examples of game mechanics. And those game mechanics can be used within an environment which is not really about games. An example here is Mindshapes, also a London-based startup. What they're doing is gamified education. So they're actually creating apps for kids to learn stuff, to learn math skills. They also have language apps where you can learn. And they really use some of those game mechanics. They use different of those areas depending on what they're trying to achieve. Another really interesting example is in a B2B environment, a company called DevHub. And DevHub, what they basically do is they allow people to create fairly decent websites. So if you're a shop or you're a dentist or a plumber, any other business, you can create a website using DevHub. And what they actually do is they gamify the whole process of creating a website. A lot of their clients, their end users, are not very tech savvy. There's quite a few of those companies that allow you to puzzle to get your own website, simple website. But what they did very, very cleverly is they really gamified the whole process and made it quite fun and rewarding. So what they did is they used different things. They used badges and achievements. For example, how can you make your website SEO friendly? They basically have certain things. They have the SEO superheroes. They have the Blogzillas, which are different things that you can add to your world to create a better website. So they really took a lot of different things. They created characters, they created a virtual world, they created badges and achievements to reward people and incentivize people, and also to work as a form of guidance in how to help people are not very tech savvy to create websites. Social interaction is also obviously becoming the standard today. Can we plug into a social graph? And a social graph, it's maybe also one of those overused buzzwords, but it basically means it's a collection of data. It's a collection of people, if you want. You can plug into a social graph. Can, for example, be if you have a football team. They form a social graph with their interests and the data and the connections between those people. But obviously, the most famous one is Facebook. But there's also mobile social graphs. Apple has their own social graph. Um, Gifting is another very powerful form of social interaction. Feedback mechanics, both internal and external. Status peer recognition, leaderboards, exchange things, for example, share stuff to unlock. A very good example of social interaction is around Nike Plus. They have an application. I think quite a few people of you are probably aware of this, maybe use it, have seen it. Where you can share with your friends, with your network, with your social graph, what you are achieving when you're running, where you're running, how far you're running, how many hills. Are you beating your best time? Are you running faster, slower? You can share those things. There's a lot of social interaction that actually makes it more meaningful as well, both for your peers, your friends, but also for yourself. It basically adds an element of pressure, almost social pressure, to achieve and continue. And the last ingredient is probably one of the most important ones. It's really the victory conditions. A couple of very obvious ones. Elimination. One guy wins and therefore wipes out his competitors, hopefully not literally. Score is an obvious one. Whoever has the most points in the end wins. The race, whoever is first wins. Territory control, think about risk. Whoever has the biggest area is the winner. Or game-specific rules. If you play golf, for example, there's quite a complex set of rules that actually determine how you win. There's a handicap and there's all sorts of things that are part of this. A couple of examples here is what you could call a gamified promotion. I think in most countries in the Western world, McDonald's organizes it, the annual big Monopoly promotion licensed by Hasbro. And the victory condition here is very clear. You buy stuff at McDonald's, every box or every drink or every bag of fries, there's a street on it, and you need to collect streets, and if you have the right collection, you can win a prize. Slightly more complex is Cloud. Cloud is a tool that it's almost like a social benchmarking tool where you can basically see how influential you are on different social networks. And the victory condition here is your Cloud score. The higher your Cloud score, the more influential, the more important you are in the world of social media. So my Cloud score is 62, which is not great, but it's not too horrible. Hopefully doing things like this will help me improve my Cloud score. So it's quite a complex way. It's not that obvious how you can improve your Cloud score. You need to have more followers, you need to be more active, people need to interact with you on the right things. And those Cloud scores is also linked to Cloud perks. Like if you're really influential, Cloud will work with its commercial partners to give very influential people stuff, discounts, maybe some things you can get for free cinema tickets and so on. It's a clever business model. Another example in a more traditional games world is EA Sports Active. The same can be said from Wii Fit, which is basically gamified fitness. The victory conditions here are much more complex because obviously we have software here that can help us manage all these things. There's points and challenges and time, and there's competition and there's friends and there's scores. So if we are in a digital environment, it's sometimes a lot easier to have those things and make them more complex. While if you're in McDonald's and we basically just buy a cheeseburger, it's probably not a very good idea to have a very complex set of rules to determine who's gonna win or improve. Obviously, there's a lot of criticism around gamification. Some people call it pointsification. It's very shallow. Just add a couple of points to something, and we call it gamification. There's also a lot of fluffy metrics. A lot of consultants will talk about how it will improve engagement, but what does that even mean, and how do we measure that engagement? So it's very important that it is not because it's cool and trendy that we should move away from using data and metrics. So really understanding what it is we're trying to achieve and how can we measure that is really important. A lot of people also say what you're basically doing is you're reinventing loyalty schemes. And in a lot of cases, that is probably true. A lot of gamification projects are actually glorified loyalty programs, and consultants can charge a little bit more because it's a bit more cooler than calling it a loyalty program. Some people say it's in a very ugly world, gamification. We shouldn't use that. And probably one of the more important things and one of the more relevant points is that game mechanics cannot fix a broken business. If you run a business and you have a very big problem with retention, if all your users leave after day 2, adding some game mechanics cannot fix if it is fundamentally broken. Game mechanics can improve certain businesses, and then they should if they're implemented correctly. But it's not that if you have a fundamental problem that adding some gamification layers is gonna help you turn your business around. And this is basically like, it is not all doom and gloom. I'm a strong believer in gamification. I do think, and I've seen it work, that game mechanics can work outside games. One slightly boring example is, for example, a very complex registration process, which is quite relevant, I think, for quite a few of you in a highly regulated industry like real money gambling, or tax forms, where you can actually make things easier. Like, take the example of a tax form. Obviously, it's a bit different depending on the country, but it's usually quite a lengthy process, and it's very hard to understand how far are you in the process. Am I doing things right? Am I just in the beginning? Is it gonna require me another 3 hours to work on this? By adding a very basic level structure, it basically gives people a better understanding. It also makes it easier to digest if you can break things down in certain levels in a clever way. For example, think about Angry Birds. They're really well known for their very clever level structure. You have a couple of very easy, very fast levels where you can actually make progress very fast. And then you have a couple of more difficult levels that will probably take you a little bit longer, but then you get rewarded again by some things where you move faster. Like, you could apply the same or a similar level design to, for example, a fairly complex tax form to basically give people the feeling that they're moving really fast. They basically went through step 5 out of 7, but then maybe step 6 is maybe a little bit more harder. So those are things where you can really make things better, more efficient by adding game mechanics. Nobody's going to say that your tax form with its levels is going to look like a game. It's probably not going to be, it's still not going to be very fun, but it's probably going to be more efficient. Feedback loops are also very important. One example I sometimes give is feedback loops in a traditional professional environment is where you have an annual appraisal with your manager. It takes you a year basically before you get really structured feedback. That's not very efficient. Like, you could actually create programs adding digital tools that help in that process, where you get more faster feedback on how you're performing, how a project is doing or not doing. So you can increase the velocity of feedback. And also the same goes for users. Which are your dropout points? If you have a funnel, are there any leaks? So it's really all about failing fast, failing cheap, learning and iterating. Another really important thing to keep in mind is status is extremely powerful. So we looked into Triplt before. It is extremely powerful compared to having a functional tool. Status really creates a whole new dimension. But you have to be very careful. Think about how you deal with your insurance company. If they make a mistake somehow, it's very annoying and you have to work on that, and it's a lot of admin, but it is not the end of the world. It's a little bit annoying, but if somebody messes with your status and how you're perceived by your peers, by your friends, by your professional peers, that's a whole different problem. Like, if something changes in your status and how people perceive you, that's a lot more painful than having an administrative mistake. So you have to be very careful. If you actually use those things, they completely change how the importance that people attribute to it. Also, badges, they can still work. A lot of people ridicule a little bit the use of badges in gamification, but if you think about the military has been using badges forever and forever. People have medals, and if you see a soldier with decorations like this, you know that this guy has done something quite amazing to deserve that. So badges can work as long as there is context and meaning and people actually understand what it means. By just adding badges to whatever you see, that's not really going to help anything. But if you create a framework where these badges actually have a meaning, like in this case, or for example in karate, if you have a black belt that actually means something, that's actually an example of a badge. People know that this chap is probably quite good in his sport. Why does it work? I'm not a surgeon, not a brain surgeon, but it basically links back to how our brain works. And there's basically three different areas we can see in the human brain. And again, this is not 100% scientific, so it's a bit pseudoscience, but I think the core is still valid and relevant. What we call the reptilian brain is basically the oldest part of our brain that actually manages our vital functions, our heart rate, our body temperature, our balance. It is very, very compulsive. It's about automatic behaviors, territoriality, social dominance, status, maintenance. So, for example, if the game is the 100-meter sprint, if you're Usain Bolt, it's all about your reptilian brain. There's not a lot of very clever strategy. It is really all about run as fast as you can, make sure you don't get a heart attack. That's what this part of your brain will manage. The next step is basically what we call the limbic brain, which we saw first in the first mammals arrived on this planet. It's much more around emotions and value judgments, about defense, food, sex, emotions. So, for example, things like Tamagotchi or Pet Society, where you have to run, we have to look after a really cute little pet in the virtual world. That's basically all around our limbic brain. Then the last thing is the most complex stuff. It's the neocortex, first seen in primates. It's much more around abstract stuff, learning abilities, imagination, language, consciousness, which a lot of people talk about the left and the right brain. And this is stuff, for example, playing poker, playing Guitar Hero. It is really appreciating things. It's thinking about stuff by being strategic and making certain decisions linked to that. So we're going to talk a little bit more around social games right now, the next 10 minutes or so. And all of the things we talked about that are linked to gamification are also applied, obviously, in the world of social games. A little bit of background, and again, this is probably not something that you guys don't know, but before 2008, 2007 maybe, the games industry was quite niche. It was a really big but very closed industry. Producers, big names, made really cool games on consoles and spent 3 years with a studio of 500 people building something amazing. It was very much, if you're not a core gamer, you're not really part of this industry. If you're a brand, if you're McDonald's, no one really wants to work with you. Non-gamers are not very welcome. And that obviously changed since then. So the number of people playing games have exploded to what is now estimated to be more than 1 billion people, for a couple of reasons. There's a couple of new platforms. We all know Facebook, but also iOS, and those are open. You don't need to invest enormous amounts of money in a developer kit for PlayStation. Anyone can basically build a game on Facebook and iOS. There's a new generation of game developers using much more metrics-led design. It's no longer about this rock star producer who has this amazing vision and idea to create this cool game around zombies. It's really about guys who look at what works, what doesn't work. Obviously, broadband penetration helped. Distribution is a lot easier now. You don't need shops and stores and shelves and trucks and warehouses. And obviously the advent of free-to-play freemium games. Games can be tried. You don't have to pay upfront. If you like it, you can spend a bit of money. So what is social games? Games using a social graph. Primarily Facebook, but also iOS, Game Center on Apple or OpenFaint. Usually they don't have an end. There's no clear winner. There's nobody ever won Farmville. Most of those are multiplayer one way or another, either real time, like Zynga Poker, or turn-based, Words with Friends, and so on. Most of the cases, users are aware of others' activities, either through the game or through things surrounding the game. Like, remember the good old days of 2007, 2008, when you woke up and your Facebook wall was all around what your friends have done in Farmville and how many cows they had fed and so on. Most social games are free, either business model using virtual currency, virtual goods, or ad-funded. Why should you care, given that you guys are not working for Zynga? This is really important. 150 billion minutes are spent every month on social games. It's an average of 10 minutes for everyone on the planet, or 3.4 million years are spent or wasted, depending on how you look at it, on social games every year. So that's quite an important one. So social games, there is something really there that you should really take into consideration and learn from. Also, a lot of social game studios and companies use next generation marketing. All the stuff we talked about a bit earlier, gamification, earned media, conversational stuff, metrics-led design, microsegmentation, all these things is really the bread and butter for social game studios, because that's how they roll. It's a very diverse audience, 7 to 77, actually more female than male. It actually skews a little bit older, typically 30 plus. And a lot of the people playing social games don't really consider themselves gamers. If you talk with people playing Bejeweled from PopCap, a lot of those people don't really see themselves as the people playing Call of Duty and so on. It's quite interesting. Also, social games created complete new ecosystem for the world of games. A lot of markets that are really, really important for social games almost never really had a big games industry. Brazil is currently the second largest Facebook market. India, third. Indonesia, fourth. Turkey, number 7. Philippines is the 8th largest country on Facebook. So all these things, there were never really a lot of game studios or game business active in those markets, and it's a whole new world that currently has been opening up. Another big challenge, big change with the world of social gaming is that brands are now very welcome. It's got a few different reasons that I will talk a little bit more about that later. And obviously, this is probably quite interesting for you guys. Social gambling seems to be a really big new trend. So obviously, also we at Plum, we are part of this. The free-to-play casino games, including poker, growing really, really fast. Monetization is fantastic. Typically 3 to 5 times more than casual social games. For example, if you compare our slots game with your average Ville game, we tend to monetize 3 to 5 times better per user. Zynga Poker, I think quite a few guys here on this call, on this webinar, are probably aware of this, but still some people are really surprised when they hear this. Zynga Poker, the annual revenue is around $300 million, $25 million per month is made through Zynga Poker, which is a free-to-play poker game. So there is real revenue there. Also, a lot of people think about, let me make a social application, social game, and then I can convert all these guys to play real money. Or sometimes I hear people say, like Zynga Poker, they have around 40 million active users. Imagine all these guys going to start playing real money as soon as the US opens up. I'm not really sure that is true. Most of the companies try to do this in the UK, for example, where it's legal, really failed. It is very much a different market. There is definitely some overlap, but people who play free-to-play games in a lot of cases have different expectations, much more around entertainment than about winning real cash. It is also not a marketing tool. If you really think that social free-to-play games, that you should do that just to get your brand out, that's probably quite an expensive and not a very effective way of doing it. Although it can obviously help build a brand in currently locked markets. Like if you're a large company, at some point you want to move into Asia or in the US, it can be part of the consideration of actually using social gaming. But it is very, very hard to make it work, especially now. We're no longer 2006, 2007. It's a very crowded market. You need a lot of talent and a lot of money to spend on marketing to still have a chance. I'm not sure how many social slots games there are currently on Facebook, but I'm pretty sure it's more than 25. So to stand out, you really need to either have a fantastic product, or you have to spend a ton of marketing, ideally both. And it's also no longer the case that you can just quickly do this with 3 guys that you met in the bar last night who know a little bit about PHP. At Plumbee, we have a team of 33 people now, working both on Facebook and mobile, and we're not one of the bigger companies. Zynga Poker, the whole team is around 250 people working on this, including obviously marketing, but still the expectations from users around products have really increased. If you come up with something really, really basic, it's probably going to be fairly painful. Marketing budgets also increase. If you don't have at least $500,000 to $1 million to spend on user acquisition, I think you're really going to struggle to hit critical mass. And critical mass is really important, not just in social casino games, but in social gaming in general. The revenue per user is obviously a lot smaller compared to real money. You're looking at lifetime values of between $1 and $5 compared to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in real money. So you need to make sure that you have a large user base to make that work. It's an interesting graph. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it basically shows how the world has changed since 2008, where farming games were all that mattered, and they really struggled, obviously, to maintain. Farmville is a fraction of the audience that it had in its heydays, and casino games are really, really kicking off in a big way. Social games and advertising, it is actually still quite small. It ties back to a certain extent around what I was talking about in conversion. It is growing within the world of social gaming. It's still pretty much all around virtual currency and selling virtual goods. Advertising is growing. Zynga created an in-house team actually last year. The there's a lot of problems actually with using social games for advertising. Most media budgets are actually local. There is no such thing as the Coca-Cola global marketing budget. There is Coca-Cola UK and Coca-Cola Belgium, and they all have their own targets in their own positioning and their own budgets. And most social games are actually global. Mirrorball Slots has users from over 200 countries in the world. The moment you start really segmenting that into like, I only want to advertise in Belgium or I only want to advertise in Norway, the numbers become really, really small. Also, technically, it's not trivial to do all these things. Also, there's not really any formalized measurement yet. It's still very early days. There's no such thing as like a standard way of actually doing those kind of campaigns. Is it CPM or a fixed fee, or is it actually a sponsorship deal, or is it CPC or CPA? The ideal way of doing these things actually is getting brands involved during the actual production process. So not have a game and then see if you can put some banners on it, but really try to integrate a couple of relevant brands from day one, and show you a couple of examples of that. An interesting point here is that actually using brands can also help monetization. Brands, especially bigger brands, they tend to add a layer of trust to a social game. Like if you have a city building game, and in that game there are brands like Coca-Cola, like Nike, it will basically give your users the feeling that this is actually being backed by big companies. It's almost like those guys have done the due diligence for you. If you spend a little bit of money, it's probably going to work. Nobody's going to steal your credit card and so on. So we've seen at Playfish primarily that adding brands can also help increase monetization. A couple of examples, I think some of those are quite well known. This is a couple of years ago where Zynga and 7-Eleven did a partnership where they actually created a whole range of stuff around Farmville. It was basically at the peak of Farmville. Another example, Farmville Green Giant in the States. They basically bought a lot of Farmville cash in bulk and added them to their products, so as a way to, because obviously it's quite a difficult category from a commoditization point of view, selling vegetables. I mean, a carrot is a carrot, right? So by linking themselves with Farmville and giving Farmville cash, which for a lot of their key targets, which is older female, responsible for purchase for the household, was quite relevant. That really helped them to differentiate themselves and give the sales boost. Another example, also from Farmville. This is quite a clever one. We're running a bit out of time, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but basically they did a campaign with Amex. Amex launched a new credit card, Centurion. What they did is they created, which sounded a little bit random in the beginning, is they created a statue that people could put on their farm. This Amex Centurion statue. And what it actually did, it is increased the yield from your crops. So the underlying brand message was that by doing something cool with Amex, you actually increase your yield, you increase the amount of money you make. It's a clever commercial decision to add Amex to your business, to your farm, to your household. So it was a very indirect but a very clever campaign from a brand perspective. And this is an example of something I worked on, and it ties back into like working with brands from the beginning. When we launched Monopoly Millionaires on Facebook with Playfish, we worked with Toyota to basically integrate the prize into the game. So one of the clever things we did was, if you play Monopoly and you land on a certain field, you have to pay tax. But if you have a prize, because it's eco-friendly, actually have a discount on the tax you have to pay. So it's bringing the message across that having a prize, it's eco-friendly, you will get tax discounts and so on. So those things are quite easy to do if you get them involved from day one. They're fairly hard to do if you actually have to squeeze it in after, because they have an impact on the game economy and so on and so on. And also, this is more than just a banner. This is actually quite an impactful and relevant campaign, and not just having a banner, click here, learn more about this. So that's it. These are all the slides I had. I appreciate it's quite high level. We didn't have a lot of time to talk about in detail about all these things, but I hope that was helpful. I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have. Michaela, I think it's back to you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Great. Sorry, don't know what happened there. So yeah, I mean, it might have been high level, but I think this is something that's going to, change our industry in the next couple of years. So the more educated our affiliate audience is, the better prepared and more equipped they can be going forward. So I had some questions come in from the audience, and now I see many starting to come in. And the first one is coming from Nicola. How do you think gamification can improve a bingo affiliate website?
I'm not a specialist in bingo affiliate websites, so it's quite hard for me to visualize what are the main points and what are the things that work and that don't currently work in that business. I think gamification, it goes back to the points we were talking about, like really understanding what motivates users, why are people there, and what are they trying to get out of it, and then trying to think like, are there any game mechanics that can help make things easier, faster, more efficient, more clear? So if part of the problem is conversion from your bingo affiliate website to actually a sign up or a deposit, then maybe by creating a virtual currency or creating a level structure to give people more guidance in how far they are from signing up and what they get out of it, maybe that is something that can help. Maybe if in a bingo environment, maybe the social interaction is more important. If you can share certain things, if you can reward your friends by signing up somewhere, if you can give them something, those are the things I would say top of my head. But I think it is quite hard without really knowing the specific problem that business is facing.
Great. Another question that came in, Raf, how do I know if gamification is right for me?
Again, it's not the easiest question to answer. I think I would say that again, looking at the different things, there is no such thing as like this is where you need gamification. This is where you don't need gamification. I think gamification again is all about making things better, making things more efficient, making things more clear for your users. So there's probably a lot of things where gamification can help. But again, without knowing a little bit more context, it's hard to say if gamification is the right thing to look into. But if you basically look at some other examples how businesses have added game mechanics to improve things, that's probably where you will learn. And I think it is in the end a decision, and it's all about testing as well. Like there's no such thing as like if you do this, you can have a guaranteed success. It's going to make you a billionaire. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be here if I knew all those secrets. But it is really about trying to understand motivation. How can I do things better? By adding certain victory conditions, for example, can I maybe motivate people more? I think that's really the way how you have to think about it. Test things, fail fast and fail cheap. There's no problem if things don't work as long as you can do it fast and cheap. You learn from that, you iterate, and you move on until you find a way that really can drive your business forward.
Great. I have another question about bingo. How do you see the bingo industry moving in the future? What is the best way to approach the age group 45 to 60 years old in social media?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. Bingo is probably the most inherently social from all the gambling products, together with poker probably. And also the bingo world is, most of bingo games, their audience is predominantly female. Also slightly older. It depends a little bit country by country. But I think the days that you can actually have a dedicated destination portal where people have to go to play your games, I think those days are numbered, specifically in games that are widely available, where you have a certain element of commoditization. It's not that this bingo game is so much more different than bingo game X. So I think if you see what Facebook is now doing in the UK with their first real money gambling app, which was a bingo and slots application with Gamesys, bingo, slots, and Frenzy. I think that is definitely for me the future. It makes a lot more sense to plug yourselves into an existing social network that actually is a much more powerful destination than trying to create your own something bingo.com. I think that model where you actually have your own portal, your own destination where people have to go to and have to remember to come back to you, I think that is probably not really where the future is. To have a siloed approach. There is a social network, and also there's quite a few other social networks. It's not just Facebook. There's also mobile, and there's also other social graphs that you can plug into. which I think is probably more efficient than trying to create all those things yourself. There's a lot of stuff that Facebook will offer you where you can plug into. Also, I think that the way how users consume certain products and services like bingo might also change. And I think social gaming is probably related, linked to that. Like what we've seen is that the actual session length is actually becoming smaller. People prefer to maybe play the same number of hours, spend maybe the same amount of money, but in a different way. They prefer to have a lot more but smaller sessions, like play 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 20 minutes there. And that's also where I think an actual portal model, a destination site model, is probably not the most efficient, where actually plugging into an existing social network might be more efficient. But I appreciate this is just my opinion. I don't have a lot of stats and facts to back this up. But and obviously I am working in the social gaming environment, so I'm naturally a bit biased. But I do think that the world of having your own .com separate siloed website is probably not really where the future lies.
Great, thank you. This question comes from Lee. It's a little bit of a longer question, so just bear with me. Do you think there's value for affiliates to drive external Facebook traffic for the social gaming vertical versus standard casino acquisition? How does one get around the barriers of authentication, etc.?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Is the question can affiliates drive traffic to social games as well as real money gambling apps? Is that the question?
I think if they're asking either or, I'll repeat the first part again. Do you think there is value for affiliates to drive external Facebook traffic for the social gaming vertical versus standard casino acquisition? If so, how do you get around the barriers of authentication, etc.?
Okay. I'm gonna answer the way how I understand the question. Like affiliate marketing is actually becoming more and more important in social gaming acquisition. Like we at Plumby, we actually, I think today or tomorrow, actually going to go live with an affiliate network, Matumi in Israel, to drive traffic to our free-to-play slots game on Facebook. And also before at EA Playfish, we also used to work with quite a few affiliate networks to actually drive incremental traffic. The biggest issue, I think, is that you need to really work with completely different CPI levels or CPA levels, where you can spend, a gambling company, gambling business can spend $50, $100, $200, sometimes more on a depositing user. Obviously, for us, we can spend half $1, maybe $2 for a user. More obviously if that is a spender. So that's requires a complete different approach. It's much more around volume and a little bit less around quality, although the two have to go hand in hand. So it requires really to rethink where you get the traffic for, how much do you pay for it, and if the question around authentication is I'm not really sure I understand what the guy means with that. But obviously there are certain barriers on Facebook for people to go from clicking on a banner to actually going into the app. But I think Facebook and the social gaming industry at large is really working on making the funnel more efficient, preventing leakage. There was a test announced a couple of weeks ago between Facebook and a couple of their top developers like Zynga, EA, and Kixeye to really do some testing around the social app authentication process, where basically you will have a much smoother process and it should actually improve the efficiency of the funnel. So those things will definitely help. And it's all about tracking in the end. Like I've seen great results coming from affiliates, both in the world of gambling and in the world of social free-to-play gaming, but it obviously required the right approach. And also, I think it's all about managing expectations as well. Margins might change, but I think there's definitely opportunities, and I think a lot of affiliate businesses are moving and offering their services to the world of social gaming.
Great, thank you. So this question comes from Social Networker. So everyone can apply the principles to development of their websites, like list building, and I asked them to be a little bit more specific. So how do you apply these principles that you talked about today to website design, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna repeat myself. I don't think there's any standard answer. I don't think it's like these are the 3 steps you need to do to be successful. Like depends on what is the area of business. Are you consumer facing or a B2B website? Gamification is not going to replace things like SEO. It is not some sort of magic solution and that will change everything. It is really almost like more a framework, a way of thinking. You have a set of tools that actually have been proven in the world of games, and also more and more in the world of gamification, that can help you improve your business. But they're not standalone tools. They're not tools that will replace your traditional web building things. That will replace your wireframes and your UI and UX. They're pretty much an additional layer of efficiency. And it is very much tied into like understanding what drives motivation and what are the things that are linked to that. If I have a consumer-facing website and my users are really, it's all about feeling that there's a level of achievement in feeling that these people are achieving something. That I think that's a complete different world than if it's all about where can I get the best or the cheapest deal. So you need to understand your users, what drives them, what motivates them, and then basically look at what are the tools that I can use from my arsenal of gamification tips and tricks that I can use to help those users to be more efficient as a business, to help them in this or that process. I appreciate that it's maybe not a very specific answer, but I think it is really hard to give like a one-size-fits-all answer to those kind of questions. I think it is really, really specific.
That's fine. Raf, are there any dangers for my players when it comes to gamification?
Yeah, I think there are actually, and I think it ties back into what I talked about, the criticism. You have to be very careful with a couple of things. Like if you're basically gonna move away from something which is quite functional to something which is much more around status, I think those are really, really tricky. Like for example, take the example of Triplt. It was a functional tool to help people plan their travel. Assume there is an outage, assume that your data gets reset. It's annoying, right? You use that tool and suddenly it doesn't work. It's not great. It's not a good experience. But in the end, it's not the end of the world. Maybe it goes back on live next to tomorrow or in 8 hours or whatever. The moment you really start building this into a community where people share, and it's all around status and making people feel or show the world how important they are and how well traveled they are and where they're going, that suddenly becomes a little bit more touchy if things go wrong, if your levels get reset, or if you basically become from the -- global manager, you suddenly disappear from that list. All these things suddenly become a little bit more emotionally charged. There's also, I think, you can over gamify things. You can also have very shallow gamification by just whacking some badges on something. That's probably not going to help anyone. If anything, it's just going to make the whole thing look quite cheap, not very efficient. And it's basically almost going to feel like you think that your consumers or your users are a little bit stupid and can be easily tricked into something. That's the whole criticism around pointsification. By just adding points to something without really understanding what you're trying to do, who are your users, and what actually drives them, that's, I think, quite dangerous. It is almost insulting for users if you have very shallow forms of gamification. So you have to be very, very careful to it's not just about putting some points and badges on a website and there you go, you have a gamified experience.
Great. So, Raf, what is the average cost of establishing my site to be ready for gamification?
Yeah, it's probably anywhere between $0 and $1 million. I appreciate that. Again, that doesn't really give a very specific answer. But
let's say for a small affiliate who's just starting in this world,
So there's a couple of things. So one is a lot of these things you can do yourself, right? You don't need someone else. Like if you have a developer, if you are a developer, you can build a lot of stuff yourself. It is not rocket science. It's not that there's only 5 guys in the world to understand level design. There's a lot of stuff available. If you Google it, there's a lot of people actually writing articles and sharing information with the world. There's also a couple of off-the-shelf solutions. There's a couple of companies that are doing quite well. Big Door Media is one of them. Batchfill is another one. And they actually have pretty much off-the-shelf platforms and solutions that work both for very big corporations. And they also have like entry-level stuff you can use to add a couple of things. I'm not entirely sure of the prices. I think it depends a bit on the number of users you have, and also obviously how much of the tools you want to use and how deep you want to integrate with them, and if you can do the engineering yourself, if you need them to work on your behalf. But I'm pretty sure there are some really cheap solutions available for people. Even if you can't do it yourself, if you don't have any engineering resources, those companies, Big Door, Batchville, and I'm sure there's a couple more, they are actually quite good, and they're really learning. They're doing both ad hoc promotional stuff. I read an article a couple of weeks ago that they did something for, I think, a campaign in Europe, one country, for Chiquita bananas. We did like a gamified promotion, and they do as well global, really large scale stuff. So I'm pretty sure that it would be interesting to look into that.
Great. I have time for a few more questions. This one is from Lee. Given the low conversion compared to real money casino, what are the benefits of pushing traffic to social casino?
I think it's a different audience. I think it's I don't think it's either or. It's either real money or social. Sorry, let me rephrase it. I think it's not the same audience. It's not like we have a bunch of people spending, whatever, pick a number, $100 per month on my real money casino. So why would I send those users to a social game where they're spending $1 per month? I think it's a different audience. It basically means you're gonna have a bigger pie. It's not you're gonna have one user and you're gonna downsell him. The other way around as well. It's not about upselling users to the real stuff. For a lot of users, their free-to-play casino game is the real stuff. They're not waiting. It's not a placeholder until the real stuff arrives. Like, a lot of people have a lot of fun, spend a lot of time, money on those applications. So it is a different audience. There's obviously different rules. It's perfectly legal in states, in markets like the US, for example, to offer free-to-play casino games. So it is a complete different business. It is not going to replace real money gambling. It is going to basically make the market bigger. And there might be some overlap, and maybe some people who get into free-to-play casino games might eventually try out real money at some point. But that I would not even take that into consideration in your business planning. It's really about a new audience, a different form of entertainment. And it's, I think, strategically also for a lot of gambling companies and affiliates, a way to broaden themselves, to move away from being purely hardcore gambling to become broader entertainment entities. That would be my answer.
Great, thank you. Last question, Raf. Okay, the term gamification. Can't we come up with something better than this? Can I use something else to describe this?
I don't think I'm in charge of the global gamification board, so I don't think it's up to me. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, a lot of people think it's a really ugly word. I've even heard an uglier word a couple of days ago. Somebody talked about gamification.
Oh my gosh.
Which is all about using gambling mechanics in the world outside gambling. So that's probably even worse. Sure, if people have fantastic ideas, I think tweet them or write about them on a blog or something. I don't think I'm the person who's going to change that. But I agree. I don't think it is a fantastic word.
Well, we'll see how that changes in the coming years. But that concludes our webinar today. Thank you, Raf, for being our guest speaker and for providing some insightful information on how to prepare our gamification strategies. As always, the recorded version of this webinar will be available on the CAP website within the next week. And for everyone attending BAC, be sure to check out Raf's session there where he'll be speaking on this topic also. Thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next month. Take care.
Okay, thank you guys. Ciao. Bye.